If you have any questions about some of these terms, you can email me later. The first one is an anti-hero, the opposite of a hero. This is a person who lacks skill, is inept, incompetent, such as Charlie Chaplin, Woody Allen, Buster Keaton, Forrest Gump. He's kind of a bumbling idiot, but he ends up succeeding at the end. Also, an anti-hero is a bad guy, like a criminal, whom we seem to be rooting for, like Walter Neff and Barbara Stanwyck or Phyllis in Double Indemnity. They're criminals, they're cold-blooded killers, and yet we're rooting for them. They don't have the traditional heroic qualities that a hero has. A hero, if I can go down to hero here in the middle, it comes from Greek hero, protector, is a person who possesses special skills, unique skills to succeed with, such as Achilles in the Iliad by Homer, who could not be beaten. If you can remember the movie Troy, which is about the Iliad by Homer, over the Trojan War, Brad Pitt plays Achilles, and at the beginning of the film, they're waiting for him to come join the army, and Brad Pitt runs up and charges a giant 7-foot tall soldier on the other side and quickly stabs him in the neck, and the huge soldier falls dead. The hero is somebody who can do things that the average person can't do. So we love watching heroes. Now, it's interesting to note that Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman in the 20th century, which is one of the best tragic dramas since Shakespeare died 400 years earlier, is named Willy Loman. The hero in Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller is named Willy Loman. He's a low man on the totem pole, as it were, and he's not heroic. He's just average. Arthur Miller tried to take the whole idea of a special hero and make him more of a common man, an everyman, and tell a story for the everyday man. But if we go back up to Deus Ex Machina, you can read these on your own later. This is a cheap device and a plot which resolves a difficult situation in a story, like a last-minute rescue or somebody being saved by the bell, or the cavalry being called in just at the nick of time in a Western film. In The Departed, for example, a wounded gangster dies just before exposing Leonardo da Vinci's true identity. It comes from the ancient Greek tragedies. It was a god out of the machine, a god lowered onto the stage in an ancient Greek tragedy by a mechanical crane in order to untangle a plot. I think there's a movie called Ex Machina or Ex Machina. I pronounce this Deus Ex Machina. Dramatic incongruity. Next is the essence of drama. It is the dynamic that produces dramatic impact. It exists between two things. Number one, what we expect to occur, and number two, that which actually occurs. When these two items are incongruous, it is dramatic. When these two items are similar, the same thing, it is boring. That is, we already expected it to occur. It happens every day, so it's not unusual. Irony maximizes the principle of dramatic incongruity by giving us the exact opposite of what we would normally expect to occur. Irony is pretty cool. Shakespeare uses irony a lot. Irony is when the opposite of what we expect to occur comes out. Hegel's ideal conflict in a story comes from George Hegel, a 19th century German philosopher who did a lot of interesting work on tragedy, tragic theory. The ancient Greeks, of course, give us comedy and tragedy. The Egyptians before the Greeks did not tell stories. The Greeks did with big theaters. We're still using the Greek theaters today. A comedy, according to Aristotle in the Poetics, one of Aristotle's great books from ancient Greece, described a comedy as a story with a happy ending. A tragedy is a story with a sad ending. But Hegel comes along in the 19th century and says that the best story of all is one that involves a conflict between two equal forces, not one obviously good person fighting an obviously bad person. That's melodrama, something very easy for children to understand. But according to Hegel, the ideal story a filmmaker or a storyteller can tell is one between two equal forces in conflict with each other. That's when things become interesting. Hegel's ideal conflict, a conflict in a story between two equally justified or two equally right forces. In Antigone, for example, Antigone is right in burying her dead brother's decaying corpse, but Creon is right in insisting that her dead brother's decaying corpse remain unburied as a symbol of what will happen to all people who try to overthrow his city. In the ancient Greek tragedy Antigone, that's Sophocles, I believe, Creon is the king. His brother, or excuse me, his son, he's got two kids. Antigone is the sister or the daughter, and Polynices, I believe, is the brother. And the brother wants to overthrow the father, Creon, and take over the city. He fails. Creon, the king, leaves his son's body on the courtyard unburied to decay, so as a message for all people who might want to overthrow the city also, that their body will decay in disgrace. It was a sign of disgrace back in the old days in ancient Greece. Antigone, his sister, loved her brother and was torn between obeying her father and obeying her brother. She knows her father has a good point, but her brother also has a right to be buried. So she's put into an ideal tragic conflict according to Hegel. Pretty interesting way of thinking about stories. The MacGuffin is very interesting. It comes from Hitchcock, a device in a story that generates curiosity, coined by Alfred Hitchcock. In Citizen Kane, for example, the whole movie is spent by characters searching for the meaning of the word rosebud, the last word of Mr. Kane on his deathbed. In Psycho, the whole story revolves around the woman stealing money from the insurance company and running off with it. When she ends up in the motel, she hides the money. She ends up getting killed by that crazy hotel owner, and the hotel owner throws her body in the trunk of her car and throws the money in the trunk of her car and doesn't even realize all that money is in there. Then he takes the car to the swamp and sinks the car in the swamp and in order to hide the body, but he's also hiding all the money. So by the end of Psycho, nobody gets the money. It's a forgotten device. It's called a MacGuffin. In Citizen Kane, well, I guess people do remember what Rosebud is, but the characters in the story do not know what Rosebud is. It's maybe the characters forget what Rosebud is. But Hitchcock used MacGuffin just as a story-generating device, something that gets the story going, like stealing money, and then at the end of the story, other events take over and the money is completely forgotten. Melodrama is a good term. It's cheap drama, simple, straightforward drama from the medieval times, or, the cheap seats, you might say. It's like bad TV. A cheap, simplified form of drama in which the conflict exists between an obviously good person and an obviously bad villain. So it's considered not very good drama. Why? There's one very, very good person and one very bad person fighting, and that's too much of a simple story to be taken seriously. Narrator, I think we already know what this is. Plot, I think I've talked about plot in the class. Plot is just an order of events. This happens first, this happens second, this happens third, this happens fourth. That's the plot. It's different from theme and other things. The plot or order of events in a story. One thing happens first, another thing happens second, blah, blah, blah. A story can be told backward in a reverse plot with an ending told first and the beginning told last, like Double Indemnity. An episodic plot uses episodes, such as the one in Easy Rider, or in other Rhodey films, has no particular order of events. The events just occur at random. I think Nashville by Robert Altman played with the whole idea of a linear plot in which a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. In Nashville by Robert Altman, he takes the whole idea of plot, throws it out the window, and just shows a movie of events happening kind of at random. Poetic justice, very cool term. Is justice in a story that occurs poetically, i.e., that is, with a special appropriateness, such as a criminal caught in his own trap, or a person getting a taste of his own medicine. What goes around comes around, you might say. Let me adjust this. A recognition scene in a movie is kind of interesting. It's a scene in a story in which a character suddenly recognizes something important, some hidden clue that illuminates the story. It creates a turning point in which things turn from either bad to good or good to bad. In Othello by Shakespeare, for example, Othello sees the handkerchief he gave to his wife in Lieutenant Cassio's hand, and this convinces Othello that his wife is having an affair with Lieutenant Cassio. Often movies have recognition scenes. They're pretty important. Story. I don't understand where the word story comes from. Latin historia, history, an account of events in order. I think Michael Jackson had a movie or something, a song maybe called His Story. 2 words put together. I kind of like that. But I've looked up the word story in a lot of good dictionaries and I still can't understand what the original meaning of the word story is. If a student has an answer to that, please email it in. Subplot. Good word. Subplot is a subsidiary action in a story which mirrors the main action. It is the exact same story told in miniature, as it were. In A History of Violence, for example, the son defends himself against the bullies in high school in the same way that the father defends himself against the gangsters attacking him at work. Lots of stories have subplots which mirror the main plot of the story, and that's why they're there, to provide reinforcement for the main story. Another drama term that's important that I didn't put on this list is subtext. There's a subtext to a lot of stories, to a lot of movies. Subtext means below the text. So in a movie scene, people or characters are talking about one thing with their words. That's the text. But that's not what's really going on in the scene. Instead, there's a hidden tension or something else is going on that the audience is aware of, but it's not referred to in the text per se. Hence the phrase subtext. A tragic flaw concept, this is important. It's from ancient Greek tragedy and Shakespearean tragedy. The defect or flaw in a tragic hero that causes a catastrophe, i.e. a downfall. A catastrophe means in Greek overturn, a turning point from good to bad fortune. Hubris refers to a tragic hero being overconfident or biting off more than he can chew, such as Richard Nixon in Watergate. That's funny. Or think of guys robbing a bank, and one of the guys goes back for one last bag of cash, and he gets caught for going back for that last bag of cash when he shouldn't have done it. If he didn't go back for that one last bag of cash, he would have gotten away with it. He was hubristic. That's hubris, overconfidence. Hamartia refers to a tragic hero making a mistake done unwittingly, unknowingly. He doesn't know he's making a mistake, such as Oedipus killing his father and marrying his mother in Sophocles' Oedipus Rex in ancient Greece, but not knowing that he was adopted at birth. That's an interesting story. You should all know, I think, Oedipus Rex by Sophocles. You should read that play.